Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
Bear down, Bears fans. Welcome into another edition of the Chicago Bears Podcast. Pat, the designer, Courtney Cronin, got to say it right, in the building. Listen, lots still to talk about because week one, preseason, we have so many takeaways, and it's always good to get that inside insight from Courtney. Courtney, how you feeling today?
I'm good. It's weird that we're now at a place that camp is at the halfway point. There's no more, technically, when by the time this week is done, no more training camp at Hallis Hall. It goes into that weird in-between preseason time, but it just shows you things are moving on and moving on really quickly. I mean, I'm excited to see what joint practices bring, and the Bears haven't done one with this staff, so this will be a first for a lot of guys here in Chicago.
No, it's going to be really fun to see. I really can't wait to see what's going to come from it. We had talked with Lance Briggs about the joint practices yesterday, and so really excited to see what this team's going to be able to get out of it. But you know, we got to talk about some impressions that were made, the best and worst impressions of week one of preseason. Also looking into which rookie impressed the most. We saw some good things out of the young fellas out there, man. So I really want to see what your thoughts are on that. And then we get Mykal Walker off of waivers. What's he bringing to this Bears team? All that and more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears Podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, drop a bar down right now. Football is back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's jump into this thing because it looks like it's a fall day outside anyway. So we got to talk some football. Let's start it off here, Courtney.
First quarter.
Who do you feel made the best week one impression? We saw a lot of good things from the team overall. Of course, DJ Moore, Justin Fields, starting off with the big touchdown, Khalil Herbert doing some good things. But outside of kind of the 2 touchdown plays, we still saw a lot of good football. Who made the best impression in week one?
You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can go here. And I will go ahead and say that it's Tyrique Stevenson. And given everything that he's gone through in training camp where he, summer breaks, they break for the summer, and he's in line for the number 2 cornerback spot next to Jalen Johnson. And then, as he put it, he had a couple slip-ups as a rookie, and he loses some of those reps to Terrell Smith and his splitting time with the first-team defense. To watch him have 7 tackles, the tackle for loss, and then that pass breakup, which I talked to him one-on-one yesterday. He said it was a good moment. It would have been an awesome moment had he come down with that and had that takeaway on the pass to Colton McDowell as an interception. Like, he's made a lot of strides, and you see exactly why the Bears drafted him with the 56 overall pick, trading up to go get him, because he is that difference maker. His length, his athleticism, the physicality. I mean, we saw him blow up a running back screen that was his second big play. That was a tackle for loss. It was a 3-yard loss. You saw him set the edge as a run defender. He did a lot of really good things, and now, sometimes it's a product of circumstance. Terrell Smith is hurt, and he wasn't playing in that preseason games. And the coaches only have what they have to go off of, which is the film, which is practice film, and it's game film. So Tyrique Stevenson seeing an opening for himself to supplant Terrell Smith, kind of in the specking order right now. We know this is a competition that's going to go on through the rest of camp, but to watch him take advantage of that opportunity and run with it and do a really good job at that, I think is probably my biggest takeaway, because a couple days after the game, we were still talking, with coaches and with players about the moments that you saw from Tyrique Stevenson in the first preseason game, and then what the next step for him is going to be as far as building on that, which I think will be good to see how he matches up with some of the receivers in Indy this week, which practice is on the horizon.
He was somebody who I really liked how he tracked the ball that day. I thought that he was flying around really fast. And of course, he's got the length, right? So if he's a little bit out of position, he's still got the arm length to be able to get in there and knock that ball away. I thought he did some really good things. And I love the fact that it didn't come at the failure of somebody else, right? Like you said, Terrell Smith didn't play. Terrell Smith has been really good in camp as well. So it speaks to more that DB depth. And I mean, like, when you see Tyrique Stevenson play like that, it kind of solidifies what we felt like we were seeing the entire training camp, where this DB room could be the best room that the Chicago Bears have on the team.
Yeah, the depth is there too. And I think with Steve, I mean, it wasn't just Stevenson, but he was my standout of the first preseason game. The hit that Kyler Gordon laid on that first drive, I mean, you could feel that energy, even in the press box, just like how that made the stadium react, how it made the Bears sideline react, and then seeing how well that unit is starting to gel together. And of course, they're without Jaquan Brisker, but watching how Elijah Hicks fills in at safety and Eddie Jackson, and kind of not seeing much of a drop off there when Brisker isn't in the game, that's a good sign that they are building quality depth in the backfield, defensive backfield, that maybe they didn't have last year. But it's encouraging if you're the Bears, knowing that you don't have this, ever revolving rotation of guys. Like you have your guys that you're eyeing as starters set. I mean, Jalen Johnson is a starter. Tyrique Stevenson, if he continues on this path, and I think I think having some slip ups early in camp was good for him, because it pushed him to not get down on himself and not to, fall off on any of its technique, to continue to get better. I mean, it's watching him guard DJ Moore practice number 1, where he said he couldn't keep up with him, to now yesterday. He did. I mean, Moore caught a slant pass on him, but Stevenson was there before he'd be out of position. Right. And those are signs of growth that are really promising if you're a coach on this team, knowing that your guys are picking up on the coaching. Your young players that you're expecting to come in and play right away are picking that up too. So it's, of all the units that have dealt with change and that have dealt with injuries, I mean, you think about what's going on with the linebacking unit right now. You think about what's going on, the shuffling up front, and some of the injuries up there. The secondary is very much emerging, and it has emerged as a strength of this defense, and potentially, one of the strengths of this team that we're going to talk about, making a major jump from where they were in 2021 to 2022, and then even further this year.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that allows it's like we've said with the wide receiver core, right? Like everybody has their position now. And for me, seeing Kyler Gordon being in the slot, he impressed me as well.
He's so much more comfortable. Like it's really remarkable, like how much he's settled into, like, this is my role. This is what I'm going to do. I don't have to focus on if they need me to, I mean, of course, if injuries happen and he had to go outside, he would, but like, he's not worried about that. He's worried about playing the run in a specific manner, and he's worried about being where he needs to be in coverage. He's playing his keys differently, and I know that sounds like such coach speak, but when you see it in action, you see somebody who's playing back there loose and not set. You can watch. Last year, you'd watch him, and he'd almost, like, you could see him thinking about what exactly he needed to do, what the anticipation was going to be before the play had even happened. And that nervous energy just isn't there with him anymore. So I think that's a really encouraging sign that year 2 in this defense, he knows, okay, I'm responsible for this. I play the hardest position in the defensive backfield, but it's going to be made easier because I don't have to worry about playing outside corner. I don't have to worry about doing specific things that maybe last year I had too much on my plate with. Like, that's a really good thing for a young corner in Kyler Gordon to evolve into, because that's a starting position, because they're in their nickel so much that he's going to see the field a ton, which we expect. And he's going to take some of the things that went wrong for him last year and make sure that they don't replicate themselves this year, because he's more experienced and because he has 2 viable outside corners, whether it's Stevenson or even Terrell Smith, because we know that even before he was injured, he was getting some good reps in there. And again, I imagine that's going to be a competition going down all the way to the wire, but I think this is Tyrique Stevenson's job to lose at this point.
Yeah, I think that he made a great name for himself in that first preseason game. And, seeing how everybody fits in, and then seeing on top of that, right, the DJ Moore and Justin Fields connection. I said this on the Windy City Breeze. I said it made me feel better about not drafting George Pickens last year, because now I got DJ Moore, and it looks like Kyler Gordon looks really good. No, by the way, Tyrique Stevenson is still a freak of nature. It seems like that's going to pan out as well. Like, it gets me excited seeing guys. And I know this sounds dumb to say, but just seeing guys be able to play the position that they were drafted to play.
Yeah. Sometimes that's easier said than done, just given how we know how this league works, where you have people playing out of position, out of necessity and injuries, but like you're not having that happen this year with this defense or even on offense too. I mean, guys are playing what they were brought in here to do because the numbers you have elsewhere allow for that to happen.
Did Ja'Tyre Carter's play on Saturday force Nate Davis to have to come back? Because I thought Ja'Tyre Carter played really well. Surprisingly well, actually, in my opinion, because I thought he was such a raw talent coming in, and it looks like he's much more poised in that first preseason game, and then all of a sudden Nate Davis is ready to go again.
Yeah, I mean, well, they need Nate Davis back because there's something like when you hear Nate Davis talk about it the way that he did yesterday and didn't want to get into any details about were you dealing with a setback? You know, what's the deal here? Are you ready to practice? Can you be at full speed? He was kind of couching it with the idea that like the coaches will tell him when he's ready to do that. He's just, kind of here to carry out whatever they're asking him to do. Nate Davis has practiced 3 times, and if memory serves, all 3 of those times were in shells. So they need to, since he's been here, he hasn't been in pads. That's a serious issue at this point. It's August 15th. Like if he's not in pads against the Colts during these joint practices, then how far away is he? And I mean, for Ja'Tyre Carter to play 70% of snaps in the preseason opener, I mean, Alex Leatherwood, I believe, played the most of any offensive players, the most of any offensive lineman. That's good work for Ja'Tyre Carter because he may have to play right guard. Because if Nate Davis is hurt and Lucas Patrick is also hurt, then he's your third string. And so it wasn't pretty at all times, but I do think that there were moments where the blocking was not his issue. Certainly with the first team offense, those 2 touchdowns, think that it was Tevin Jenkins who actually went the wrong way. I saw a video cut up of this, and you can watch on the second touchdown to Herbert. It was kind of what Matt Eberflus was alluding to. The blocking was great on the DJ Moore one. The blocking was not great because somebody went the wrong way, Tevin Jenkins on that second one, but the right side still recovered. And you can see those 2, I think it was Whitehair and Carter getting to the second level when they needed to. And it shows you like he's growing within this. Is he ever going to be a top tier starter? No. But to get him to a point where you're comfortable with him as your depth, that's better than being in the alternative. It's better than what this offense was dealing with last year at this time. So I think there are some net positives for Carter too coming out of this, that he's getting a ton of run with the ones. I mean, Nate Davis was back in practice Monday, but he wasn't doing anything. He went through individuals. He was dressed out, but it's still Ja'Tyre Carter who's getting those first team reps. As long as he can continue to do that to stay healthy, because I don't know what they would do. If they had another injury and if he was involved in that, like, I don't know who the 4th string right guard is right now. I don't even think they do. So that's not a great spot to be in, but he was getting a lot of reps with the 1s and with the 2s. And that's what you need for a player like that, who was a late round draft pick, who, was, on the practice, he was, not called up. He wasn't on the active roster a lot during game days. Like, you got to get him up to speed so he's ready to go in the event that he is starting week 1, because they've been so vague about this Nate Davis thing that we just don't know how serious it is and when we're going to see him.
I've said this from the beginning. It feels the same as how they talked about Lucas Patrick all offseason. It's one of those things where it's just, when they tell me I'm good to go, like he instilled no confidence in me yesterday with his press conference at all, right? Like, I mean, I was like, do you feel good?
And I don't think anybody could walk away knowing anything one way or the other. Yeah. It felt like he was either told, don't disclose anything, keep it really vague, or that this is his way of being like, it's worse than it, like, whatever I'm dealing with is worse than it's being made out to be. And I'm going to make that clear. Like, he did himself more harm than good by the way that he handled his press conference yesterday. I don't think that is, that's fact, because there's more ambiguity now. There's people calling into question. Like, when you and I talked, I think it was like July 31st or August 1st, whatever day that press conference, whatever day we did the podcast, and you asked me about like my concern meter with Nate Davis. And I said, I'm concerned. 2 weeks later, Pat, I'm concerned because this is not something that is solved. We've seen no answers to this. He comes back to practice last Tuesday, and then all of a sudden he's out again. Like, what's going on here? If it wasn't a setback, then what is it? Is he somebody who feels that he needs to be at 100% to play? If there's something nagging, will he not play through it? By him not answering those questions and showing any sort of forthcoming about what's going on, those are the assumptions that get brought up. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, do yourself a favor and don't just try to gloss this over as respectfully, I'm not talking about this. That does more harm than good. And I think that he's in a spot now where a lot of people are calling into question, like, what's going on with you? You just signed a 3-year, $30 million contract here. You didn't show up for most of the offseason program. You are here one day when the team's not in pads and something happens during reps where you get replaced or you're splitting your reps with Lucas Patrick, and then you refuse to talk to the media that day. And then all of a sudden you're not practicing, you come back, then you're not practicing. What is it? Like, this is a concern. And I don't really know how else to say it other than until we see him in pads, there's every reason to be concerned that he's not going to be ready for week 1, despite what's being said about everybody being week to week at this point, because this guy has not had any actual real reps, live reps in pads with the rest of the first team offensive line. You have every right to be concerned if you're a Bears fan.
And it's not just, I don't even think it's just fans. Remember, Matt Eberflus said, at this point, you have to start worrying about continuity of guys.
Sure,
I get it.
On the offensive line.
Nate Davis said, I played with a rookie last season, so I know how to adapt to that guy. You played with him, though. Yeah. You haven't played with Darnell Wright yet. And that's my concern, right? Like, are you guys going to be able to acclimate well early on? Now, the only thing that makes me feel better about it is at least it's on the side that Justin can see. And we know we have a quarterback that can evade, but it's not all pretty. It's not all pretty in that backfield. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we keep moving forward. Good best impressions. Now we got to talk about the worst impressions as we head into the second quarter here.
Second quarter.
But first, I got to let you know it's brought to you by the Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana. You can see Black Veil, Bridges, and Vivi on September 28th at Hard Rock Live. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Courtney, I'll start us off here, but I do want to get your thoughts on it because I think the worst impression in week 1, and I know everybody's saying Bayless Jones, that is still a very bad one, right? And we could talk about that as well. But if it gets past Justin Fields, I have no confidence in anything behind him. PJ Walker has had a it's been
terrible.
Bad training
It's
camp.
been terrible.
It's been a terrible training camp and a terrible week 1.
No, I mean, like, they signed PJ Walker because they expected him to better mirror Justin Fields' skill set. And if Fields has to miss time, which he's had to his first 2 seasons due to injury, they wanted somebody who can better take the reins, having to kind of tailor the offense on the fly to a Trevor Siemian or to a Nathan Peterman. This doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all. And it's not just It's not just the game 2 days ago where he goes 4 of 8 for 19 yards and an interception. Like, during the team period yesterday, he looked not very good. And some of it is just like the timing element too. It just looks like he's rushed and it looks like he's not anticipating the right place to go with the football. Like, I know he's had a really cool story going from like XFL standout to the NFL and playing last year in Carolina, and they saw the similarities. They saw, the continuity he had with DJ Moore and with D'Onta Foreman, and to be able to bring some of those pieces together. It doesn't look good though right now. DJ Moore does not look like a good backup quarterback, and that's no slight on him as a person. It's slight on him as a quarterback. Like, he doesn't look like he's capable of running this offense. And
is it just that he's new to it?
No, it shouldn't be that, because he's a veteran quarterback who's played a lot of different places. I just don't understand. There's such a noticeable drop off, which of course you expect when it goes from the starters to the backups, but the skill with the backups doesn't look nearly as much of a drop off as it does from the quarterback to the backup quarterback. I'm concerned about PJ Walker. I really am, because I don't think right now he's a viable backup option for Justin Fields. I think that they would end up having to become a more run heavy team in those moments if Fields had to miss time, if there was some need for, the second string quarterback to come in, because accuracy has been a problem for PJ Walker throughout training camp. It has not gone away, and it's not gotten better.
And it's weird, right? Because I think that, of course, the depth chart is going to change every day. You want PJ Walker. They want PJ Walker to be that guy, but I left the first preseason game saying, I don't know, man. Bagent might be the dude that we might need to put in because at a minimum, he's hitting receivers in their hands or near their hands. PJ Walker, that first pass, like they tried to shoot him some bail. They're like, Equanimeous cut his route off a little too early. Like, unless Equanimeous was Manute Bol out there, he never would have been able to catch that football.
Yeah, the Isaiah Ford catch was the catch of the day, and that did come from Tyson Bagent in the preseason game. But I worry about it because it just, it was a 2-year, $5 million contract. I think 3 of it's guaranteed. So it's not a huge deal, but you went out and thought that this guy was going to be the best backup option. And very clearly he's not right now. And Tyson Bagent's a former D2 kid. No slight on him at all. Like, if you end up outplaying somebody like PJ Walker, then that's like, what does that say just about, where this team is in terms of being able to select players and thinking that this might be the right fit versus something that's not. But I mean, Bagent, if I could throw him in, we were going backwards, but like, he was somebody who impressed me in limited action. Nathan Peterman, it's whatever. Like, it's fine. What he is. Like, he'll either be on the practice squad or, they keep 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. They will not keep 3 because they need those numbers somewhere else. But Nathan Peterman is a serviceable guy to keep on the practice squad. Bagent could end up playing his way. I mean, I'm not at all going to start like any sort of rhetoric that there's a battle now for the number 2, but let's see what Indy's practices bring, because that conversation may become real depending upon what we see the next, couple days or so.
No, for sure. Outside of that, I mean, Javon Dexter was an interesting one to me. When I've watched the tape back, it still seems like he hasn't gotten to the point where he's flipped his brain from 2 gap to penetrating style defense. He's the last lineman usually to get off. Now, granted, he did have, I think it was just a hamstring pull or maybe a cramp or something like that that happened on the sideline. Nothing ended up being very serious, but didn't see a lot from Javon Dexter in that day. I feel like we can throw him in there for one of those guys that didn't make the best impression early on.
Yeah, and I think he was hurt too. I mean, there was a moment at the end where I remember seeing him at the end of the second quarter holding out his leg, and I think it was yesterday he had a sleeve on it. So there's a reason that like they're bringing him along the way that they are, though. We saw Yannick Ngakoue yesterday, getting my days all wrapped up in one. Like, Zach Pickens had, I thought, a very good showing. In Javon Dexter, there was still stuff to be desired, with what we've seen with him. But it's encouraging when the vets are taking time to work with some of the young guys, and with what Javon Dexter, still some of the things that like they're trying to fix of his, because he's playing a different sort of technique here as a defensive tackle. Watching Yannick Ngakoue work with him yesterday and talking about like the cross chop and seeing how coaches have, tried to put him in a better position where it's going to be trying to simplify what he does. I thought that was, a good position for him to be in. But yeah, there's still a long way for him to go. I think that's why you've seen, maybe it was an overreaction at first, but people are like, oh man, like Justin Jones are going to be pushing for his spot, and they're going to be in a period of where Zach Pickens and Javon Dexter, when they get up to speed, those two, Billings and Jones, are going to be out of jobs. Yeah. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that you can see that Justin Jones is firmly planted himself as your 3 technique, and it's going to take a lot to supplant him. And that just the gap between the starting DTs and the backups is pretty wide right now.
It's Andrew Billings might be the surprise signing that we have, because I think we knew what he was going to be in the run game, right? He comes in, he's a big body, but like the pressure that he's been able to create early on, like he's actually surprised me in training camp going into this first game. I'm really, like, not to say he's like our Akeem Hicks, but he's that signing where it's like, oh yeah, that's a good signing. Maybe that's a better signing than we thought it was, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and he's not somebody, like, I know when he came here and he told us yesterday that, like, his body was a focus. He's a huge dude. And like you want somebody like that to help stop the run up front. But focusing on his body and being able to cut down. I think he said he lost 4 pounds, but it's actually helped him move better. It doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things when you have a 300+ pound dude.
Yeah.
But I am very pleased with the early returns that we've seen from Andrew Billings as a run stuffer and what he provides the line up front. I think that talk about all the movement up front and, where's Travis Gibson going? Is he, going from a starter's role to a 4-stringer? And Yannick Ngakoue and how he fits into everything and what that means for everybody else. Like Andrew Billings has been the only consistent. We really don't talk about him much because he's been in there at nose and he's done his job and he's done a good job of it.
When you do your job, you don't always get the most vocal people looking at you because he's like you said, solid. Was there anybody else that you thought really made didn't put their best foot forward in week 1 that stood out to you?
Velus is one that I think that we really still need to talk about. The muffed punt, and I know that Eberflus did kind of give him some credence. He said that was a really hard angle, like back-to-back hard angles on those punts. But that opened the door for Tyler Scott to get in there at punt return. And when I talked to Tyler Scott one-on-one after the game, he had mentioned that this is an area that Richard Hightower really wants him to focus on. And now that Dante Pettis is back, we saw him at camp on Monday. He was practicing. He was practicing back there at punt return. I would imagine that Velus in the competition there, it's only going to start to get heated, like in a good way. There's going to be a lot of competition at punt return. You just can't have those things happen. And that's tough for Velus because he's really been coming along nicely in camp. He had a couple of good catches yesterday during the 11-on-11 period. To have that translate, though, let me pull up his stats. What else stood out? I mean, he caught 1 pass for 6 yards. So it really wasn't much offensively that I thought really stood out for him, but he can't make those mistakes on special teams because we saw what those mistakes led to in the games last year, particularly the Washington game and then the Giants game before that. It's not good. I would really think that there's a lot at stake for Velus, especially coming up with these joint practices this week. I think he's really got to show a turnaround there. And I'm not saying you have to play error-free football, but if there's anybody who has to get as close to that as possible, because they're really asking him to hone in on 1 or 2 things and do them really well, it's got to be Velus Jones.
Is there an opportunity on this team for him where he actually can just be a receiver? Because like you said, couple catches yesterday. We've seen him make catches in camp where he can just be a receiver on this team and he doesn't have to be that special teams guy that has to be relied on for punt return.
In terms of Velus, somebody else. No, I think that's. I go back to what Matt Eberflus was saying. It might have been Getsy. Remember, they want to use them on jet sweeps. They want to use them on motion plays. We are seeing that. I actually saw a lot of.
You're seeing a ton of it.
Yeah, in practice, you see a lot of Darnell Mooney doing that with the ones. I think Velus. I don't want to I feel like his ceiling is as a gadget guy, and if he can't give you what you need on special teams, I don't know what the role for him is going to be, sadly. I really don't. He's a 3rd-round pick. They're going to give him every opportunity. He just can't play like he did on Saturday. He cannot play like that. And muffing a punt, and I know even Tyler Scott had some issues, but it was on offense. It was just.
It was one of those things where watching that game Saturday made me go through because I think it did set Velus back a lot. And I said, who might he be ahead of on this roster right now? And as far as special teams or receiver, I couldn't give you anybody. Because I said if we're being honest, he's behind Travis Homer right now. Travis Homer can catch punts, return punts, catch kickoffs, return kickoffs. He's behind Tyler Scott probably because Tyler Scott was just drafted. He's behind, you can go down. For me, he's probably behind Dante Pettis right now.
Yeah, that's the one. That's who hasn't played. So, I'm with you because I remember yesterday watching some punt return because they were indoors and it's due to weather, so it's hard to tell. But Isaiah Ford was back there. Dante Pettis was back there, and he just came off NFI last week. So they're going to, probably bring him up to speed. He didn't play as far as I can recall. I didn't see him play during the game on Saturday. Now we'll see if he ends up getting any reps in Indianapolis, but That's more numbers. Like, this was Velus Jones's time, the first couple weeks of training camp, when he didn't have, the other guys kind of breathing down his neck, trying to take his job as a punt returner, and even on kickoff return. You saw what that depth chart looked like. They should be putting one out here, in the coming days, like for the next preseason game with the flip card. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see too many changes, because they're not going to want to overreact off one game. But Velus is probably on like the hot seat, if that even exists, like that sort of terminology for the type of role that he's looking for here, because it feels more one-dimensional. It feels like they're trying to pare things down for him. And I think he's kind of on the outside looking in right now. I really do, because it's not just, okay, what can you add? It's, can we trust you to do your job? And if they can't trust you on punt return, if they can't trust you to catch the ball, and yes, these were hard punts that came his way because of the direction of them, that's still not going to, you're still not going to get the benefit of the doubt from that. You just won't.
It's like Lance said yesterday. He said, I asked him, I was like, can we shoot him bail? Because remember, in college, he wasn't really a punt returner. He was a kick returner. But I said,
Tyler Scott wasn't a punt returner either, which is interesting. Right. Like, Richard Hightower is like, no, please focus on this. Does that not tell you that maybe they're like, hey, we have somebody else here that can't do it. We're going to maybe throw this on your plate. And because he's making the roster, there's no doubt about that. But like, giving him responsibility to see the field early. Like, if Velus Jones was so good at that, they probably don't have Tyler Scott do something he's literally never done until this year.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Well, I always say this. I'm going to just talk about it. Prove me wrong. I love when players shut me up. When players shut me up, it's like, hey, bro, like,
he's got a lot to prove. He's got a lot to prove, though, dude. Like, he really does. And I feel for him, because it felt like things were going pretty well in the first couple weeks of training camp. And then you put one of those things on tape, and other teams see it too, because, 90 to 53, there's one cut this year. So if the Bears, and we've talked about this, the Bears are going to give him every opportunity as a third round pick to get it right. But if he can't, some other teams looking for him, be like, where can you contribute? Like, if the Bears won't keep you, and they had such shallow depth at receiver for a year, like, does that, like, what avenues do you have after that?
I feel like, and it's tough to say, but I do agree. They're going to give him as many chances as possible.
They have
If it was me, I probably would move on, but I think he could be somebody even that makes the team. You go into the season, and it's one of those situations where it's like, you got one shot. And if you screw up one time on it,
he might not even get there, though. Like, if there's another mistake, and I hate being so down on it, but like, if there's another mistake like that, they can't hedge that again. There were too many of them that happened his rookie. He cost him 2 games last year. 100%. And it's just, you can't afford that anymore.
Yeah. No, the leash in the NFL is short. It really is. And so
even for third round picks.
Hopefully, even for third round pick. Well, we'll talk about that later. I believe we just got, he might have been a fourth. I think he was a 4th round pick, but we got a pick off of waivers that was cut after 3 years in the league. So we'll see kind of how that looks as well. But as we get the halftime here, Courtney, halftime, my favorite time, because you've always got interesting things to talk about. And I got to ask you about this. The blind side, it's not a real thing. Like, it's tough now. Michael Orr suing the family. Apparently they were a little shiesty. It's not Sandra Bullock's out there realistically. Like, what's going on here? What's happening? What are we missing?
I mean, there's like, so I was in Mississippi when this story, like, I think when was the movie out? Like 2010, something like that.
I was somewhere around there. Yeah.
I was down there in 2013. So of course, like the Tuohys and covering Ole Miss, and like, that name's royalty down there. And then kind of seeing, okay, wow, this is a really cool story. It happened right in the backyard of where I was in Jackson. And there was always people who were really skeptical of it. Yeah. And then to see the Associated Press article that came out that he's suing the family and all these court documents. Look, there's a movie that has an actress that won Best Oscar for her performance as Leanne Tuohy in this movie. And you find out that this whole story more or less is a lie, that they tricked him into signing papers, like, so they could have conservatorship when they didn't technically adopt him. It was like the ick factor that comes out of all of this. Cause I remember really liking the movie. And of course it was, it definitely felt like it was Hollywoodized, having known people who were like close enough to the story. And, you know, he owns this thing called D1. It's a workout facility. A lot of athletes in Mississippi utilize for the off season. And I know the one that he owns down in the metro area of Jackson, Mississippi. So I'd spent some time there, and people are always kind of like, yeah, The Blind Side. Like, yeah, right. Like we're kind of rolling their eyes at it. Like this was a story that was made into a production that was, you know,
beautiful in Hollywood.
Yes, and like that, it was just this glamorous thing. Like, no, it wasn't. And I don't know how we got to this point where somebody didn't look into it just feels like something somewhere in a very serious way along the way did not look into the background of this and just took it kind of at face value. Oh man, this family in the Memphis area, out of the kindness of their heart, takes this kid in and then gives him a bed. And like, then, you know, all of a sudden he like rises to fame as like an Ole Miss football. Like it was too good to be true. And I honestly think that it gives you, you know, kind of puts the fear of God in you if you're a journalist, because like you can't take things just at face value, because, you know, research would have done us a lot of good in finding out the real truth behind this. And
apparently just asking him.
I don't know. The thing is weird. It's like, why did it take so long for this to come to the light?
It's so weird. And see, are you like me where, right, for me, now I'll probably never watch The Blind Side again. No. Because the entire time I'm just going to be like,
why? Like, it's all a lie. Why would I watch that? So no, I'm with you. I think it's really shady how this whole thing went down, and for it to come out in this manner it's just disheartening. That's like, you know, you're finding people that, you know, but what's going to happen to the Tuohys? Nothing. Like, they're getting sued,
nothing. They're
like they're going to be fine. Like,
they were rich before this; they'll be rich after. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird because like I said this,
and they knew what they were doing was wrong. You can't tell me like tricking somebody into signing conservator papership it's just weird. That's just gross.
I hope that he wins this, because the fact that, one, you made an entire lie up about his life. There were things in there that he's openly said. He's like, I don't remember going to a crack house to see my mom, but all right, that was cool in the movie, I guess. That was very strange that y'all threw that in there. Like, he's talked about openly how he's like, yeah, like this is not fact. It's okay. And you didn't even pay him a dime off of the movie of his life.
That's messed up. Like, how do you not, like, because he was an adult at that time.
Yeah, he was in the league for what? He'd been in there 5 years at that point.
I don't know. Like, it just, how did it get, like, I still can't wrap my head around how it got to this point. Like, and now all these years later, what is it, 2023? Like, more than a decade after this movie came out.
Yeah.
Now we're just finding this out. Like, was there some sort of gag order? Was there something in place that wouldn't let him come file this lawsuit until now? I don't understand it.
Well, he probably had to go through all of the red tape to get the contract he signed or whatever removed before he could do it. Like if we're being 100% honest, this is also, he was a rookie when that movie came out. Oh, they wasted no time. He got drafted 2009. I thought he was in the league before that.
So the movie was 2009. The movie
came out 09. He comes into the league at 09. Solid player the entire time, pretty much. I mean, good player. 7-year career till 2016. This is the Britney Spears situation, if we're being 100% honest.
Yeah, you're right. Because remember, like, it took her a long time to get that conservatorship removed.
I wonder if he's been going through this the entire time he's been in the league, though. Like, this is probably
because if they made him sign it before he was around like 18.
A movie about what?
Yeah. And if he had no say on it, but like, how did it? I just like, how did nobody find out about this until now? Because obviously he would have known. He would have been feeling these feelings all these years, and like, unless he was like bound by law to not say anything, which is it's not the case when you are under conservatorship. You can say what you want. It's just that some other people have legal, basically power of attorney over everything you do in your life.
Yeah,
that's just doesn't make any sense to me. This is not the last we're going to hear of this either. It's a really sad and messed up thing. And, I don't know if he's going to be able to recoup any of the funds that were garnered or the money that was like garnered, for his likeness, but it's shady, man.
It's weird. It was a weird thing. I just had to bring it up, and it throws everything off for me, right? Here's the thing. I'm the person that like Remember the Titans is always tainted for me now, even though I'll still watch it. It's a great movie. Once I found out like the coach acted nothing like that, and he started acting like that once he saw Denzel depict him in the movie, I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, now it's not as good of a movie. It's still a great movie. I do watch it.
Yeah.
But, let's keep this thing moving along. Let's get into the third quarter here as we talk about this rookie class. We've talked about some of the rookies at this point. Courtney, which rookie impressed you most?
So I went ahead and said Tyrique Stevenson, so I can't say him again. I will say Zacch Pickens. It's hard. I want to say I want to say Darnell Wright, but like I just don't know if I got to see enough of him there. And of course, like he had from what I understand, because I wasn't at practice last week because I was in New York doing TV, but it sounded like he had a really rough day that second to last team practice, which you expect. You're going up against NFL defensive ends, even if some of them aren't like the top tier guys, you know, and you're not going up against Yannick Ngakoue. Like he still struggled, but I mean, first team offensive line, what it was, you know, with Ja'Tyre Carter in there on Saturday, I thought it was good. But I will say Zacch Pickens, from how active he was at, you know, being able to blow up play action and being able to get into the backfield and get a sack on Saturday. He played really well. And actually he played more than I thought he would. I'm just taking a look at his snap count from this game, because I remember looking at a period in the second quarter, like, are they going to keep him and Dexter in there? Because remember, Gervon Dexter, there's a series where he got hurt, then he still stayed in, and then he went to the sideline. But Zacch Pickens played 60% of snaps, and then he played 3 plays on special teams. I came away really impressed by his ability to penetrate and his ability to get in the backfield, and also just like how much of a load he is for offensive linemen to handle. I mean, this guy's a force, and he's still raw in what he's doing right now, but he had a sack. It was an 8-yard loss, you know, hitting the quarterback, the tackle for loss, and then that fumble recovery. We know that, you know, hits principle showed up in a big way in this first game, because there was, you know, you go back to Adrian Colbert, the forced fumble and fumble recovery, and then the one that Zacch Pickens was able to land on and, you know, come away with the ball. That's the hits principle in action. And for young players to demonstrate like the importance of that, I think is important.
Yeah, I thought that Zacch Pickens did an excellent job. I thought he really impressed me because he's been somebody whose name has been quiet throughout training camp. Not to say he's been doing things wrong. He just hasn't been someone who it's like every time out, you're like, I feel his pressure. I feel the presence. I feel him in the backfield. And he's been somebody who's been around there, but I thought, there's certain players when the lights come on, they're able to make an impact. To me, that was Zacch Pickens in that game, right? Seeing him come off the edge, seeing him be able to put pressure on the middle, right? Moving around that defensive line as well. I thought he did a really good job. I mean, like, that's what we've talked about the entire offseason, right? Who's going to make the name for themselves, Zacch Pickens or Gervon Dexter. It was good to see Pickens be the one to get out to a good start. And I think we'll see Dexter catch up. I'm not overly worried about it yet, but I thought that it was a really good start from Pickens. And
like we talked about earlier, Dexter still has a ways to go because he's changing from, like, you know, being in a 2-gap system at Florida to what he does here now, which is just to get up the field, get to the quarterback. Pickens, like, they're competing for playing time. And if I guess if you had to judge it, like, who's ahead right now, if you're just kind of looking at it in a vacuum, you take a look at, okay, well, you played, what did I say it was? 32 pass rush snaps. That was for, or 32 snaps. That was roughly, I think, what Dexter had, or 35. And then what you saw with Zacch Pickens playing 44, you know, to generate a quarterback hit out of that and only have like one, like, you know, he's an interior defensive lineman. They were switching in and out personnel. Like, that stuff's going to happen. I would expect those numbers to rise if this was like a real, true game situation. But to show that you can do it, you know, against backups, it's a good start. But I'm really pleased with Zacch Pickens because I think you saw the flash there. You saw like the very beginning of what this thing can be for him. And this is somebody, again, when you talk a lot about joint practices and the guys that are going to benefit the most from this, being able to go up against somebody else's offensive line that you're not afraid to hit, that's where he can really like make some ground up this week and show the technique stuff in action and show that he's like ready to go when his number is going to be called. Because I still think that there's a big gap right now between it was just an experience and skill between where Justin Jones and Andrew Billings are. But these other two guys, as you know, are going to be part of the rotation. But they're going to rotate those guys in the interior quite a bit. So the guys who are getting the extra work and the guys who are able to, generate that pressure on the interior to keep the quarterback high in the pocket, like those are going to be the guys who get their number called on game day to go in on third down, to do things that, will help pressure the other team into obvious passing situations. And that's where he can carve out a role for himself pretty nicely early on.
Yeah, I thought he really showed out. I also want to throw Noah Sewell's name in there.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been doing that too, which
he has.
Whether Sanborn's been in there or not, I didn't really think Sanborn had that great of a game. But like Noah Sewell, I keep wondering when they're going to use him as a pass rusher in certain moments, because he did a lot of it his last season at Oregon, and we saw him come away with a sack on during Saturday's game against the Titans. Like, to be able to utilize him in that format going forward, how they do it, when they do it, and what situationally that looks like, he has really, really come on strong. It's maybe one of the rookies that we don't talk about enough. Another couple games like this, though, he's going to play his way potentially into an even bigger role at linebacker, which right now we know they have a couple depth issues, but you play like that, you stand out like that, that only helps your case.
Yeah, and I think that you hit the nail on the head with it, right? Like, to me, when I watched him out of college, he pass rushes. I'm not going to say pass rushes like his brother, but he pass rushes really, really well, has really good pass rush moves. And I feel like he's more comfortable blitzing the quarterback. I think he came away with 8.5 sacks at Oregon. So he's a guy who can do the job, but then he's also quick enough to be able to play out in coverage, different things like that. He was really good at forcing fumbles, different things like that. So he's somebody who I'm trying to figure out. And I've said this a couple of times. I get it. Jack Sanborn's been here. He's got the job, even though he hasn't played a ton. But I don't think that Jack Sanborn is leaps and bounds ahead of Noah Sewell on anything except he played last season. And I get it. That does have an impact on where you're going to go. Jack Sanborn played well last season, but I can't sit here and tell you that he's solidified ahead of Noah Sewell the entire time.
You got to be your best ability is your availability. And yeah, he played, but like, it's not a done deal that Jack Sanborn is ahead of Noah Sewell right now. And might be on paper on the depth chart, but in reality, like, he's been hurt. He was hurt during the offseason. There was a period of time that he had to miss during this training camp due to injury, one that he gets sustained during a goal line series. But Noah Sewell, again, it's like what we were talking about, earlier with other guys, like Tyreek Stevenson. Like, do your job. Don't worry about the fact that the guy that you're competing with is hurt right now. Like, make up your ground and just keep your blinders on and keep going. I would give that same message to Noah Sewell, because he's done a really good job. And what we saw during the preseason for him, 4 tackles, one of which came for loss, and the sack and the quarterback hit. That's a great stat line for a backup linebacker who is going to be playing situationally. And in this defense, if you can carve a rollout for yourself there, and let me see, what were his special teams numbers? If he can find, a spot for himself there on special teams, whether it's on, kickoff return or on punt return. He played 9 snaps on special teams. That's working your way into something that could actually give you a pretty nice role and a pretty nice, set of responsibilities as a rookie.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those guys who it feels like no matter who ends up being the starter, Matt Eberflus is going to find a role for you. Yeah. He's going to find something for you.
Team really likes him. Likes him. Everything you hear behind the scenes is just about his work ethic and how he really does embody that position. He's a guy who doesn't shy away from contact. He loves the game of football. And I know it sounds so cliche, but like most conversations I've had about him, those are among the first things that come up. And I feel like his role, they can tap into so many different things that, his last year at Oregon, he was used more as a pass rusher, which he wasn't in previous years. So what did they see there? Can the Bears try to find something out there? I know that when I asked about that during the draft, there really wasn't any sort of definitive response one way or another of how it was going to work out for him. But I think he's in a spot that they can find somewhere to have him as a situational pass rusher, which would be good. And of course, linebacking unit right now dealing with some injuries. Good time for you to make your mark if you're someone like Noah Sewell.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that leads us right into our fourth quarter, right?
Fourth quarter.
Bears go get Mykal Walker off of waivers. Courtney, is this a depth move? Is this a camp body? Or is he somebody who's actually got a shot to stick around on this Bears team?
Well, we know that they released, I think it's Coney Dang, who was the linebacker. They made a move for him after they put in 3 waiver claims. So they've been very active in that. You might as well take advantage of the position that you're in with this number 1 team, in that order to claim guys. So we do know that Tremaine Edmunds, it's day to day. According to Matt Eberflus, that's still the reasoning that they're giving us. It is, Matt
Eberflus's day to day is terrifying. I'm not gonna lie to
you. The fact that he said that there's no concern, and then Alan Williams said there's zero concern that he's ready for week 1. Like, unless they're just not saying it, like it's going to end up being worse than it is.
Yeah.
At least it gives you the hope that he'll be ready for then. But it's not just Tremaine Edmunds that's missing. Dylan Cole was out of practice yesterday. DeMarcus Gates was out of practice yesterday. Those are depth guys, and Dylan Cole was a terrific special teamer, especially when he started his career with the Houston Texans. So I think that this Walker claim is a good one. Then he could actually be someone who sticks around, because you take a look at some of the other linebackers they have in there. I'm not so sure that there's others that he wouldn't end up trumping in the depth chart, like Johnson, number 50 for them. Is he worth keeping around, or do you want somebody who started 12 games last year for the Atlanta Falcons and had a career high in tackles? I think he had 4 or 5 tackles for loss. He had a sack last year. He had some takeaways. This might be a really sneaky good claim for them of somebody who might not be a starter for you, but you're bolstering your linebacking unit when depth is a concern for right now, but also somebody that when the dust settles and you do get Tremaine Edmunds back, you might like this person as a situational player in various sub packages. So good to have, and we'll see what he ends up becoming. But I thought it was, when I saw it go through on the wire yesterday, I thought that was a very smart claim on their part.
Yeah, and it's one of those guys where he seemed like he wasn't bad with the Falcons. He just seemed like he wasn't what they wanted him to live up to. I feel like he could be a guy that maybe just fits a role here. And that's why I love what this new front office is doing, right?
They're very active.
I'm just going out to find a guy that, what am I asking him to do? This specific thing. Mm-hmm. If you can do this specific thing 10 times a game, you can have a spot on this team. And I feel like Mykal Walker could be a guy like that who's able to come in and, hey, listen, we just need you to be out here for 25, 30 plays so that these guys can get breathers and not screw it up.
Yeah.
I've seen him be able to do that down in Atlanta.
He's a situational guy to start his career. He's entering a contract year. This is a good opportunity for him to cement himself somewhere after playing his way into a starter's role. And we know Atlanta's defense, there was a lot to be, there's a lot left to be desired coming out of last year's group, which is why they made so many upgrades. But one team's cut might actually fit another team's, which is why the Bears, they're not just going to claim everybody, because eventually you have to let somebody else go off your roster. But if you can make your linebacking unit look better by having an influx of talent, not necessarily, we're not going crazy with it, but
right.
If it's better than what you had, you make that move, because it's a cost efficient way to go about this. And this is somebody who, not only those stats that I read, 107 tackles, 4 for loss, the interception. He had two interceptions last year in addition to the sack. He's clearly somebody who can play in coverage pretty well. Yeah. And that's not bad if you have a backup option like that. So I commend them for it. And to the bigger point here, they've been very active. The Yannick Ngakoue thing, signing the top free agent pass rusher available, bringing in Mercedes Lewis, not just because you want a third block, a third tight end who can block for you, but because you want to help the younger guys along. Everything they do is calculated, and these moves have been very smart based on what their plan for this group is.
It's good to have a smart front office, and it feels like we finally got one. No slight to anybody who came before. Yeah, it's a slight. No, that was a slight. I'm sorry. Hey, but we're going to keep this thing moving along. We appreciate you guys for showing love. As always, hit that like button, subscribe to the page. We've got Monday through Friday coverage right here. The Saturday coverage was amazing, and we're going to be running that back this Saturday. You can hear all that on ESPN Chicago, ESPN 1000. So stay tuned in with us on that as well. For Courtney Cronin, I am Pat the Designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.